I'm very much focused in on the community and sharing back what I do. And part of being a Salesforce MVP is really about three traits. It's about your generosity, your expertise, and your leadership. People work at different companies, they have different problems, they have different industries, but at the end of the day, we're all working on one core platform, Salesforce.
Welcome to Salesforce Radio, your destination for insights, news, and community connections within the dynamic Salesforce ecosystem.
Hi, Nadina. We're very, very excited to have you here joining Tech Talks and our new Salesforce Radio initiative today. You're a Salesforce MVP, just been renewed in 2024 and a Golden Hoodie recipient. You play a very active and vibrant part in the Salesforce community. So we're delighted to have you here. Can you tell us a bit about your Salesforce journey and how you got here?
Yes, thank you so much, Alice, for having me today. So when it comes to my journey, I don't know how far back we want to back up, but I really see it as starting when I was doing my master's and I had to figure out if I wanted to do an internship or do another paper. And I decided to do an internship instead. And I interned at a company that was an ISV. And they did Salesforce. And that's how I really got started in Salesforce when I did that internship. And how it came about is once that internship was done, I actually went on to work with that company full time, started as an associate developer, and just basically went on to what I am now as an architect in the Salesforce ecosystem.
And can you tell us, can you elaborate more on your MVP journey, how you got there? Because that's an amazing accolade. How did you reach that point?
Yeah, so it's interesting because I think one of the things that people think from like a Salesforce MVP perspective, it's something that you can, do a few boxes and then you will become a Salesforce MVP. I'm very much focused in on the community and sharing back what I do. And part of being a Salesforce MVP is really about three traits. It's about your generosity, your expertise, and your leadership. And so what typically happens with that process is you are either self-nominated, which is something that you can do now where you can self-nominate yourself, or you're nominated by your community. And I was when I became a Salesforce MVP, I was nominated by my community. And so it's something that I wasn't aspiring to become. It was just something that I was doing. I always tell people, even if I wasn't in Salesforce MVP, I would still be doing all the community initiatives that I'm doing now because I really am passionate and I care for the Salesforce community.
That's amazing. So for you, it was an organic journey, and the MVP route was more of a byproduct of doing things that you really loved and really cared about. Well, that's what it sounds like.
Exactly.
Wonderful, wonderful. So leading on to my next question, you're an ambassador for many inspiring Salesforce initiatives that I'm sure a lot of our viewers follow, such as Salesforce Well-Architected, MuleSoft, Ladies Be Architects, Dreamin In Color. It's a lot going on and all really, really exciting. Can you chat a bit more about those initiatives, why you care about them and what you do?
Yeah, so keep me honest and make sure I haven't missed any, but I'll start with my MuleSoft one. So the MuleSoft ambassador is very similar to the Salesforce MVP program, where it's the MuleSoft community side. And so becoming a MuleSoft ambassador was really big for me. At the time when I first started MuleSoft, I tell people, I inherited this project that you're going to be leading the MuleSoft implementation. And I did not know anything about MuleSoft. And it was very interesting working through and learning about the API-led approach and learning about the community. But I think one of the biggest eye-openers for me was that there was this huge other community outside of Salesforce, and it's like a thriving community. And so I became a mentor and then I became an ambassador of that program. And I still do a lot in the MuleSoft side. Still talk a lot about things like Composer that is now, an integral part within Salesforce. When it comes to the Well-Architected ambassadors, that program is around the Well-Architected framework and really, I would say architect.salesforce.com and how architects can show up in the community and ensuring that they are following the best practices, the patterns, and being able to do the well-architected trainings and workshops and evangelizing just Salesforce best practices. It's something when I first started in Salesforce, architect.salesforce.com did not exist. It was very much you had to learn from other architects, or you had to be lucky enough to be working with architects who had this deep level of knowledge in the ecosystem. Now, when it comes to the other programs, Dreamin In Color and Ladies Be Architect, those are more of my, I would say, volunteer programs that I'm associated with. So Ladies Be Architect was started by the late Gemma Blizzard, and it was really about bringing people together and making sure that women see themselves as architects and women can become architects and going through that journey. And then when it comes to Dreamin In Colors, same thing. It's from a diversity perspective, right? Having that space within the ecosystem to be heard, be seen, and just know that you can show up and you know where your people are, you know where your tribe is.
How do you think some of these diversity initiatives are enriching the Salesforce community?
I would say, especially for Dreamin In Color, it didn't exist. Before Dreamin In Color, if you ask me point blank, if I knew many Black technologists in the Salesforce ecosystem, I would tell you I know a handful. I know a few because I've seen them here and there. And so to have things like the Dreamin In Color conference and to have that space now where you can see people who look like you and who are, in technology, doing Salesforce, and just having that space, that tribe, that community has been very enriching. And I think a lot of people right now, they're very excited. We have a conference that's coming up in June. And it's one of those things where it was something very much needed, but it didn't exist. And so when it came, it was of course it should be there. Of course it should be a conference. It should be a community that is there. Why wasn't this there before?
It sounds truly trailblazing in its own way, and very, very exciting from what I followed. So you play this very strong community role in the Salesforce ecosystem, both as an ambassador and as a volunteer for your passion projects. But this in some ways might seem like a full-time job, but you're actually a full-time CRM enterprise architect, which must be a handful all on its own. How do you balance the two? Do they complement each other? Do you find that you're pulled in different directions, or how does it work?
I think for me, the balance is there because, as an enterprise architect, I'm looking high level, strategic, everyday vision, right? And then from a Salesforce perspective, I've always been, and I think this is why my developer career did not last as long, is that I'm always looking at the top. I'm looking at that big picture, and I always want to understand the boundaries that are within, how can I make sure that I'm at the best that I can be? How can I make sure that the customer I'm working at is at the best that it can be? And sometimes there's a point where you're doing the best with the resources you have, but then at the same time, you're always striving to ensure that you are bringing those best practices and that high level prescriptive guidance. And so being involved in the community has helped me in two ways. One, as an enterprise architect, you don't get into the details and the implementation side. So I'm not doing hands on keyboard these days. So it helps me to understand what are the high level problems that people are facing in the community from a high level perspective of people work at different companies. They have different problems. They have different industries. But at the end of the day, we're all working on one core platform, Salesforce, and we're all trying to figure out what's the best way we can use Salesforce? How can we bring the best of Salesforce to our companies? And so being involved in the community helps there. And then also there's a networking aspect of it. There's a lot of different roles and personas, and being able to talk to architects about one thing, developers, admins, designers, consultants, the list can go on in terms of roles in the Salesforce ecosystem. But I think it helps give me a well-balanced architectural mindset to understand these different roles. And then I can bring that information back to not just my company, but then reshare it across the community as well.
Of course, that's a really good response. Really interesting. Your professional trajectory to becoming an architect, it wasn't necessarily the traditional one. Can you chat a little bit about that and what do you think others can learn from your journey?
Yeah, so I think for me, like when I looked at the Salesforce ecosystem initially, when I was saying, I'm going to be a developer, I have a background in computer science. And so it was very much, this felt right. Like I should definitely start as a developer. Somewhere along while I was working at that ISV, I figured out really quick, it's better to understand the overall platform. It's better to understand not just the Apex side of things, but also the administration side of it, right? You're working on one platform. So for me, I wanted to really focus in on the platform. Now, as I've gone through to different jobs and, different companies, one thing I focused on for me was the platform because I knew that companies change, industries change, but the platform was the same. And so I really dedicated a lot of time, not just learning the developer side, but learning the overall platform. And so I remember when I saw like my first architect and understood what architects do and understand that big picture and how deep and technical they were. And it was like, oh, that's an interesting thing because that's the way I think right now. That's the mindset I have. And so it's very hard to make a change when it's already a user story that you're about to develop. But when you're in that initial road mapping, planning, and figuring out how do these capabilities work from your enterprise level, that's where big changes happen. And so as architects and being an architect and being at that very high, let's say 1,000-foot view, it's very important there to make sure that one, you're able to articulate these changes because as they come back down to, the development team and to different other personas within the ecosystem, it's very hard to make the changes there. And so as I was going on my journey and I was thinking, what do I want to be in the Salesforce ecosystem, so to speak? Architect felt natural. And so that pivot from developer to architect always felt natural. And when I became a Salesforce CTA, it was very much literally, I woke up one day and I was like, this is something I want to do. I want to go and study for this exam. And it was like a 2-year journey and it was a labor of love. But at the end of it, it's one of those things where you get to say like, yes, I'm a Salesforce certified technical architect. I'm a trusted advisor on the enterprise. And so it's all been a very complimentary journey. And I think it's, in some ways it might feel like untraditional because I think most people will focus in on a very specific, like, this is the industry I work on and this is how I'm going to do my career. Whereas I think I'm more of a generalist and I focused in on the technology side because you can always learn the business side. So very long answer to say yes, it's been an interesting journey.
Yeah, it's a great answer because also you can wake up one morning, as you say, with this passion in your heart and figure out, well, I am an architect. I have this high level view. I have these skills. I can explain these big concepts. But as you say, it's not a journey that you can just sort of wake up one morning and complete. It's something that takes place over several years and that, not many people in the Salesforce ecosystem get to be. So you are, one of the most trusted voices in the ecosystem. What were your major challenges over that 2-year journey?
Yeah, I would say there's been a lot of things. I would say that when I started the journey, you're very hopeful, right? That it's like, this is how the journey is going to go. And I had like this outline pack of I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. Somewhere along the lines, things get blurred and it's a lot of pivoting and you have to be very flexible because things don't always go the way you think they will go. And so having you have to have a lot of strength and I would say mental strength to go through the journey because it's something where it's very taxing, especially on you and your family. But then also it's like that support. I didn't have a lot of support from my previous company. So it was something I really had to dig deep and figure out okay, is this something that I want to persist? Is this something that I want to keep going? But yeah, I would say at the end of the day was something where you have to make sure that, you're well rested, you can do your best, but then also you have to have the persistence and the longevity to finish what you started.
Yeah, and I guess for you, there was a very strong why through all of that, persisting with you, by the sounds of it.
Yes.
Yeah. So, in our experience, the Salesforce is hungry for new content, quality content, potentially stuff that's sometimes a little less technical and a bit more accessible. But what do you think are the biggest content gaps in Salesforce right now? And what kind of content do you think Salesforce consumers want in your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of different things, right? There will always be that content that is, I would say, role specific. So if you're a developer, you want to understand what are the development best practices. If you're an architect, you're really trying to understand that overall picture. If you're an admin, you're looking for productivity and how you can be more efficient whether it's in setup or it's with, your business value that you're delivering. So that role specific content, I think people will always be hungry for it. It doesn't matter how many times you put out something, there's always a different voice, a different spin on the content. I think a lot of content as well that might be, let's say, missing is that high level executive content. It's there when you're within a company and people are speaking to it, but I don't see it a lot when you're outside looking. So like if you're saying, what are executives thinking about, or what are the things that are keeping them up at night? Within the company, because you're living and breathing it day in, day out.
Yes,
but if
yes.
you are trying to figure out like what is top of mind right now, and you go to Google, well, most people will say AI, but what about AI? Or most people will say decision making, but what about decision making within Salesforce? So I think that type of executive content sometimes is missing, but then also there's a caveat to it because most people are very technical. So they want to speak very technical, but with executives, they're always time deficient, so to speak.
Yes,
they are always,
yes.
They only have so much time to consume it. And so being brief and having that brevity to be, this is what you're trying to get out. This is what you need to understand so that you can make that decision. It's a very interesting skill and a very interesting way to present information, because sometimes you're condensing information and you're trying not to lose the meaning in the information. So I would say that type of content isn't available. And then for people outside of Salesforce coming into Salesforce, there's of course ways to get in via like Trailhead, or I want to understand best practices, but sometimes it's not always clear on how do your skill sets transfer to now within a Salesforce role? Because I've heard people say, I'm, starting over in tech or making a pivot, but you have this whole career that you're bringing. And I think sometimes being able to prioritize and repurpose those skills within Salesforce is very much of value. You're bringing a very different mindset, which will always help you within your role.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Sometimes people assume they're starting from scratch, but actually they have existing skills, and it's just figuring out how to implement them in this ecosystem.
Right.
So, I mean, talking about content, I have to mention that you just launched a podcast.
I did.
I think yesterday or the day before, I don't know, but very recently, and it looks great. TechSips with Nadina, right?
Yes. And I launched it actually on my birthday, which was March 5th on a Tuesday. And yeah, so that...
Happy birthday, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, that podcast, it's been something I've been thinking out for a while now. And I've been trying to figure out, again, there's so many things I can talk about. And I really actually did not want it to be just Salesforce focused, because I do a lot of work now across multiple CRMs. And so I wanted to be more of a industry focus, some of that high level executive talk that's very simplified, a very short form, and being able to just put a few points across from my perspective.
And what do you think, Seth, you're saying, Salesforce is not the only CRM or that you're working across, but as a CRM enterprise architect, what do you think is special that Salesforce offers?
I think from a Salesforce perspective, one of the things why I really love the platform is that there's, again, whenever you go to, and I don't know if people are seeing it like how I see it, but this is my take on it, right? Whenever you go to one of the big conferences like Dreamforce, they always tell you what the strategy will be. There's no confusion in terms of what they're doing and how you will get there. And then they use the other conferences to start to distill down the message to say, okay, for example, last year's strategy was around data, AI, CRM, and how data cloud and how AI is coming to the enterprise and how they're transforming the metadata framework. And so now, as we talk about AI and as we talk about data cloud and we talk about how all of that fits into the enterprise, there's never confusion there on what that strategy will be. Salesforce has come out and said, these are our capabilities. This is what we're trying to do. This is how we're going to enable US customers. And that's something I've always loved about the platform, is that it's very open and honest in terms of trust. It's very easy to get in and figure out exactly what you need. And then at the same time, the message will be repeated. So whether or not you are able to come to Dreamforce, they always make sure that it's accessible. Whether or not you're able to come to other conferences, there's a massive community where they will help to get the message out there. And I think Salesforce is unique within that perspective, that the community is very focused on making sure that, they're doing well. And if they think something is wrong, you can always tell when the community is upset about something. But at the same time, when Salesforce is doing right, they will always be the ones to say, yes, we really are getting behind the message in terms of what Salesforce can and cannot do.
That's absolutely fascinating. So in the last year, we've seen the world transformed by AI, ChatGPT. Salesforce is now calling itself not just the leading CRM, but the leading AI CRM. What do you think are some of the biggest trends, AI included and aside from AI, that we're going to see in Salesforce over the next sort of 1 to 2 years?
I would say, I think from Salesforce perspective, there's a couple of things, right? It's going to be what partners are bringing. So the AI within apps built on Salesforce to help the enterprise and to help businesses. Salesforce themselves, they have a suite of things that they're doing, from productivity across all the clouds, sales, service, etc. And so I think productivity is going to be a big thing. Enabling the business to move quicker will also be huge. And then what partners are doing in terms of their AI capabilities that are built on Salesforce.
You obviously are a well-known influencer. You now have your own podcast. I'm interested. You've achieved a lot in, not necessarily, some people have had much longer careers and not achieved as much. But where do you see yourself in 5 years as a Salesforce influencer, a member of the community? Do you see yourself branching out from that? What's the plan for you?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because I always have this long strategic roadmap, and I typically don't share it publicly. I would say in the next 5 years, my focus is right now is really it's two-pronged. It's okay, so I've become a Salesforce CTA. I've done the big exam, so to speak, from a Salesforce perspective. Right now, what I'm doing is learning all the different things that I didn't have time to learn, right? So across the industries, the different clouds, I'm really focused right now on MuleSoft. I want to get more up to speed on data cloud. So I would say in the next 5 years is really strengthening that position in terms of what else is out there from a Salesforce perspective. Me personally, I'm very focused on strategy right now. And so I want to, in the next 5 years, really be honed in on, again, digital transformation, IT transformation, and CRM as a whole. So whether Salesforce is your CRM or you're replacing your previous CRM, what's that prescriptive guidance that you can get from someone like me to make sure that that journey is as smooth as possible?
That's interesting, and we can't wait to see what you do next. What do you think is your superpower when it comes to mentoring others and actually being a leader in the CRM world? Because as you said, you're a volunteer, and a lot of things you do just out of the genuine passion in your heart to give back skills to the community. What do you think is special about you that you impart and that you can inspire others with?
I think for me, so I'm very much an introvert, right? And I think one of the things that is a very interesting skill that I've honed over the years is that I can listen very well to people. So I don't listen just to respond. I listen to understand overall what you're trying to do. And I'm very much meet people where they are. So when I talk to people, I like to understand, where you're coming from, what's your mindset and where you're trying to get to, because sometimes people are very much comfortable in, this is what I want to do. This is how I see myself. I don't see myself doing anything, right? And I was there. Like if you had asked younger Nadina that, hey, you're just starting off as a developer, by the way, one day you're going to become an architect. It's like, no, that's the role I see myself in right now. Like I'm hardcore developer, right? And so it's very much, I have that skill of meeting people where they are and understanding the things that they're not saying, right? In terms of, as we communicate with people, as we're listening, as we're understanding and mentoring, I'm never one to tell somebody this is the only path. What I like to do is help people figure out that there are actually multiple paths, and how you get there isn't as important as what did you learn along the way.
That's really well said. And it also strikes me that there's a lot of overlap there into the mind of an architect and someone who really likes to understand what makes things tick. And as you say, listen and figure out, the reasons and the motivations behind certain things. So I absolutely love this chat. Learned a lot from you. Is there anything you would like to add or to talk about in closing?
I think for me, I would say two things. As people are going through their Salesforce career, just remember that the journey should be fun. The journey should be something that is your own. Don't compare yourselves to what others are doing. Don't compare yourself to what I'm doing, because I definitely had a very different journey. Make sure that you're doing that journey for yourself. So really ensure that as you're learning, as you're growing, stay curious, be adaptable, and then have that journey for you.
That's a wonderful closing. Thanks, Nadina Lisbon, for joining us. This has been a fantastic session. And we'll keep following your journey and stay in touch. Thanks for joining Titan.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of Salesforce Radio. Don't forget to subscribe for more exciting discussions, expert tips, and exclusive interviews with industry leaders. Stay connected with Titan, plus the power of the planet's leading CRM. See you next time.